Welcome.
All right, thank you very much, Peter, and thanks everybody who came from the break. As Peter said, I'm Jan, I'm with Students for Liberty and with a local think tank here in Prague. And I'm apologizing for everybody who I misled with the title on the agenda. There will be no music, fortunately you will not hear me sing. But instead, I will tell you a little bit more context to the tour that we have tomorrow and the recent history of Prague, especially if you are from further away. But consistent with the theme that we have this year, I decided to start with election. We just had one recently. And I imagine that if you that you are all familiar with the scene, then you are watching the election, or if you are from Prague, you are most likely watching the election more like this. And then somebody goes, that's it, I'm moving to Canada. Or in this crowd, I'm moving to Prospera. So my talk is going to be a brief history of this region of Prague, of Czech Republic, through the lens of those who did make this decision and voted with their feet. And hopefully that will make it more tangible rather than just a bunch of facts and numbers. But I will start with some numbers anyway. So this is the overview of the last 150 years in terms of how much people are coming and leaving. And as you can see, the story of Prague and the people who voted with their feet is more of a story of those who left. And as Greg Mankiw says, people respond to incentives and everything else is just an explanation. So hopefully this talk will be an explanation of this graph. So let me start in the 19th century, where the Czech Republic was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The official language was German. And what was happening there? Why were so many people, almost 200,000 people leaving? So in each decade, why was this happening? So this is the period when urbanization was still going on. People were moving to cities. As you can see, the population growth of Prague was much bigger than the population growth of the overall country. And since the country was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where people were moving were not just Prague from the countryside, but also to Vienna and Germany. So I have a few faces to make that more tangible. So many of you might not know that the economist Josef Schumpeter was born in the Czech countryside before he moved to Vienna. So was Sigmund Freud. So those are the people who were moving to Vienna from the Czech lands in this period. Also, there were actual Czechs like Karel English, who is a lesser-known economist, but if you are familiar with Mises, this guy is quoted in Human Action or cited in Human Action as one of Mises' sources. So these are the type of people who were moving to Vienna and Prague from the countryside in this period. People are also moving just generally for better jobs. That doesn't include just Vienna. It also includes further away, like France or the US. There was an emigration wave from the Czech lands to the United States at this time. So that's why you can see things like Hruška z Koláče in Texas and many other places. You get people like Anton Čermák, who became the mayor of Chicago, or artists, composers like Antonín Dvořák, who in this point of time went to the US, wrote the New World Symphony, before he eventually returned. And finally, the type of people who were leaving at this point were the political exiles, like the later to be first Czech president, or Jaroslav Hašek, author of the Švejk book that you may be familiar with. Then, after the First World War, when the country became independent as Czechoslovakia, you have the return of the exile. So this is one of the only times in the country, in the history of the country, one of the few times where there was actually inflow of people into the country. There was generally a good economic situation. And then as the situation began to crumble around the world into authoritarianism with the beginning of the USSR, and later on with authoritarianism on the rise in Germany, Austria, and elsewhere, Prague became, and Czech Republic generally became, Czechoslovakia at the time became a haven for refugees. So you have people like Oskar Kokoschka, painters, artists, writers, like Thomas Mann in the second picture, but also political exiles from Germany briefly finding refuge here, which is what gives you the positive number of migrants to the Czech lands in the 30s. The World War II was, of course, chaotic everywhere, and it's hard to find any credible statistics, so let's skip for right after, which was, again, one of the darker times. So this was the time when the country did the expulsion of most of the non-Czech-speaking population. So this is the time when this actually became more of a monocultural place rather than a mix of Czechs, Slovaks, Germans, Hungarians. So this is where the Czech Republic expelled each year over 1 million people after the end of the war. And very quickly after, communism came to power, which is after the brief history of few years in which people were returning from exile after the end of World War II. Gives you, again, another period of people leaving, people who were opposed to communism. So you can see how many people quickly left in this period of 2 years. You see something there that you don't see often. You usually talk about illegal migrants in connection of people coming into countries. This is the period when illegal migrants were illegally coming out of countries. So this is where people and families of people like Madeleine Albright emigrated to the US, or the second person there is George Voskovec, a Czech actor who starred later on in American films like 12 Angry Men here in the picture. After communism comes in, the Iron Curtain goes up, and migration, of course, becomes more difficult. So you get people like this man in the picture. He is one of the people who were termed the kings of Šumava Mountains. Those are the border mountains in the south, and these were people who were helping people who wanted to go to exile, find ways through the woods, through the mountains, and bypass the border guards and the fences that were coming up on the border, preventing people from voting with their feet. There is a brief liberalization in the 60s, which is when, again, some people returned from exile. They tried to revive more of free speech in the country, but it goes sideways when the Warsaw Pact armies invade in 1968, and that, again, in the chaos, gives you a big wave of emigration. You can see how, again, in the 60s, there is many more people leaving, because in the chaos after the invasion, the borders were were looser for a while, and a lot of students, young people go away, but also, again, people who were vocal about the invasion. So that, again, gives you a wave of more political exiles, journalists leaving, and artists. So an example of that could be Miloš Forman. You might be familiar with Amadeus. So he left after the invasion. So did, for example, Milan Kundera, whose book you might also know. So those are people who were living in the late 60s. Afterwards, there was a period of normalization, again, more crackdown on opposition, more illiberal reforms of the media, and so on. And the borders, again, became much less passable, which gives you stories of people trying to escape on hot air balloons, swimming through rivers, and other daring escapes like that. You get more of them even in the 80s as the regime was still weakening, but still the borders were very hard to pass. So you again have stories of this man, for example, who was trying to fly over the borders on a glider, or whatever this is called, with his son. So this is, again, what you could get as people trying to vote desperately with their feet in the early 80s, before the Berlin Wall came down, and before communism crumbled also here in 1989. Before moving on, these are just the general numbers of the illegal migrants trying to vote with their feet. So even though it was technically traitorous, illegal to leave the country in this time, you see that many people indeed went ahead and searched for better fortune even then. Since then, since the 1980s, the Czech Republic became a safe haven for many people, both for those who are looking for economic opportunities, especially from Eastern Europe, and since the full-scale invasion to Ukraine, of course, it became one of the welcoming places to the refugees from that war, displaced by the invasion alongside Poland and other Central European countries. So summing up in a few phases, Freud, Masaryk, Kokoschka, Voskovec, hot air balloon, and Ukraine. That's the brief history of the last 150 years. I hope you join us tomorrow for the tour and learn more. What does the future hold? Of course, voting with our feet is becoming more difficult. Because of these and other people. So what do we need? I'm very happy that we are here and we are finding the solutions here because this is the Halloween weekend. I couldn't resist. So for the emergency response, we need the Ghostbusters to rid us of the scares of taxation, regulation, and other ways that hinder our prosperity. But in the long term, because not everybody can move to Prospera yet, we also need to fix the timeline and we need to look further ahead and make the change happen also where we are and where we plan to stay. And that is why Students for Liberty are here to help fix the timeline so that in the future there is hopefully more freedom everywhere. We are an international organization. We have students all over the world in 40 countries, just in the extended understanding of Europe. You can also still find us in the lobby so that we can tell you more. And just one more thing I wanted to tell you about us before I leave is that we also host our international conference every year in Europe. And you are the first audience to hear, as in the last 2 years before, that the next LibertyCon, our conference, is going to take place in Madrid, again in late April. We again expect more than 700-800 people, advocates for freedom for all over the world to join us, and I hope you will again be among them. This is the picture of the 2022 one that happened here in Prague. We've been growing since then, and we hope to continue doing that in Madrid this next year. So thank you very much. I hope you join us for the tour to hear more about Prague tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.